Hi there, folks. Just having a bit of technical problems at the moment, so just bear with me. Okay, let's just see if anyone else arrives. Something, something sort of strange just happened there. I don't know why, but I'd already sort of arranged this meeting, and then YouTube sort of seemed to forget it, and I had to start another one up. So I'm just hoping people are going to be able to. So say something in the chat if you've managed to sort that out, or is still not obvious. Good. You just be watching me look a bit confused at the moment. So there we go. Okay. So if you're tuning in, say you can type something in the chat thing and say hi. Just nice to know who's out there. So happy Easter. Hope you're all well. I have had, well, again, it's a bit of a strange time at the moment. Sort of the days just roll one into the other. But I am sort of spending quite a lot of time on my YouTube channel at the moment, just trying to sort it out. As you can see, still haven't quite got the hang of all the technical aspects. Another thing is I was looking at how YouTubers use backgrounds, and this my little room I've got here is not a very good background, and perhaps having that window isn't ideal either. So they're things I might sort of try and sort out at some point. Other than that, I think yeah, life is ticking along. Yesterday was probably I went to go shopping, do my weekly shop, and that was a bit difficult because all the supermarkets were completely the queues were going around the block because they were doing this one in one out, and I guess because it was Easter weekend coming up, but so that was a bit strange and wasn't able to get quite as much as I wanted, but other than that, things are ticking along. And nice to see I've had quite a bit of work handed in this week, so that's always pleasing to see. So we'll go through those in a minute. I'm just gonna double check to see. Oh yeah, okay. So Ellie's here, and Phil and Stuart. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so we'll have a Zoom session. We'll have a Zoom session, Phil, after this. So I'll just go through, as I normally do, go through what's been handed in, and then yeah, that shouldn't take us. I think by 11 o'clock we should be up for another Zoom meeting. So for those of you that want to join in that, you've got the link, and you can ask me any questions. But yeah, so I think we'll just crack on, go on to Photoshop and see what people have handed in. Okay. So, first painting I've got here is by Rupa Chitta, which is posted in, which is really nice. Excellent work, good to see. And she has asked me a few questions about that. Now, I'm just going to do a little bit of an adjustment here, just because of the way it's come across. So, photographing your artwork is in itself a bit of an art form. And you get this thing where it tends to it's either in perspective or it's a bit skewed. So I'm just going to stretch it just a little bit to imagine we're looking at it a bit more straight on, something like that. Okay, so hopefully that's not too bad. Okay. And then Rupachita was asking me a little bit about. Actually, let me see if I just. Ah, there we go. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so basically, sorry, Rupachita. On these Friday feedback sessions, we start off on here and I do my YouTube bit, and then afterwards we go on to Zoom. So perhaps I'll try and send out something over the weekend and just clarify that for everyone. But hopefully you can see this now. So yeah, thanks. I got that this morning. And yeah, you were asking me a question about basically being able to adjust the paint. And all I would say is just remember this, the principle here with oil painting is the idea of fat over lean. And so what that means is that when you start your painting, you are trying to paint thinly. Okay, so you try to use quite a lot of terps, thin the paint out, almost like washers. And it's thinner, so it almost will dry a bit quicker. Not thin, so it's like dripping down the page, but basically you take the oil out. And then as you build up the painting, you gradually get thicker and thicker, maybe sometimes using a medium to make the paint go further. But I can see on here you've got some quite thick passages of paint, which is really nice. One of the things people struggle with when they start painting is actually not painting thickly enough. So it's good to see. But yeah, you've run into the well, it's sort of like a problem, which is basically once you've got thick paint on top, it's difficult. It's more difficult to adjust. So all I would say is start off thin and then gradually work up. And normally the way you work is the darker areas tend to be thinner, and it's when you put the lights on, perhaps tinted with white. Oh, hi, Alison. Hi. Um, then that's where you put the thicker passages in. Okay, and it helps give the lights a sort of almost texture, because I can see here you can see the texture of the board, okay, and that will also be affecting the way the paint behaves. But other than this, yeah, I think this is a really nice study. So I would just have a quick look at it in black and white. Okay, so I guess that might be my only criticism. If we look at it in black and white, we can see that the tones all become a bit too similar. Okay, so just think about your lighting and try to create a bit more contrast. So whether it's the fabric's darker or the shadows are a bit darker. So now you see sometimes you have a bit of a tension between colour and tone, but I would say perhaps try to go a bit darker with some of these areas. So I'll just do a little bit. Let's have a look. Just to show you the sort of thing I mean. So I'm just imagining. Okay, so if that was a bit darker, then what I'm thinking is that you could get this contour to read a bit more strongly over the top. You see? So you could just create a bit more tonal contrast and increase the overlap, the sense of the overlap. So in fact, if I go for a harder edge and I go for this, let's see. So even harder edge, and you could just increase the feeling of that coming forward. Okay, so yeah, just perhaps some of those tonal areas. Let's see. So perhaps even, so if I darken that area just a bit like that, again, that helps to create a bit more tonal contrast up here. So I guess really what I would, the strategy you're looking for is just to perhaps maybe when you're setting up, because you've got some great colors here, but also perhaps try and, you know, you could take a picture on your phone, look at it in black and white, and just try to get perhaps a slightly stronger tonal structure, and then the colors will sit on top of that. Um, oh, Val's here, so hi Val. Okay, so yeah, let's take it back to its original. There we go. But yeah, very nice, and yeah, I really like the color scheme. So yeah, I think the colors are good, and stick with the thick brush strokes. That's a really nice aspect. So yeah, just the only, you just have to consider a little bit more what you're doing and make each brush stroke count. So thanks for that. So here we are on to Alison's. So here's Alison's reference material. Very nice setup. Um, so, and here we can see a really good example of scale. Okay, so we've got big, medium, small. So hopefully that's the main takeaway lesson from this week, is this trying to use scale to set up. And Rupert Chitter, you mentioned something about like difficulty in getting this effect. I think one of the things is you have to sort of get your eye level a bit lower, and you also need, I mean, it doesn't look like there's a large amount of distance between these two, but obviously the longer your table is, the more you can exploit this idea of scale and depth. Okay, so yeah, the other thing is you get this problem where sometimes, you know, one apple's going to be bigger than another, and then if you arrange those the wrong way, it's not going to work. So you can also bear that in mind, and just try and take advantage of it. So there's Alison's reference, and here's what she did. So again, we can crop this. Okay, yeah, so very nice study this. I particularly like the colour palette. I think that works really well. I think if we just, in the original, the blue is very greyed out. It's although it reads as blue, it's almost like a grey, and it's also broken up with this white. And I do wonder whether it's not, I mean, it's not, doesn't compete with the highlights, but that might have also added a bit of interest to this area here. So that's something to consider. The other thing I was thinking was, as it happens, you have got quite crisp shadows. So I was just thinking about, yeah, if we look at this shadow shape here. So not to be too picky, it's just something that you should sort of like look for is, if I just draw over the top of this, let's just pick a bright color. Okay. So this shadow is like, it's quite wide in relation to its depth. Okay. So if we go on to your one here, it's a bit longer, it's a bit more square in that respect. Okay. So I think if I was gonna improve that, I might bring that out a little bit further. Okay, but other than that, I think you've got the right effect. Darker under the lemon, and same with the shadows. Yeah, so nice and dark under the lemon, and then getting a bit lighter as you come out. Okay. Yeah, so let's have a look. Brightness, contrast. Okay, so adjusting the contrast, maybe it could have had a bit more contrast. If we look at this, okay. So I think this one works really well on a black and white. I think compositionally it works, it's nice. You've got dark shadows here, a nice sort of balance. So I think tonally it's, we push that even a bit further. Yeah, it's a nice sort of reference material. So I think maybe you could have got a bit more, you could have pushed the contrast a bit more. Let's see. Maybe with the background just being a bit darker, and you know that you've got strong lights on top of the lemon, so maybe a bit of that hitting the top of the table also might have been quite nice. But yeah, they're excellent, and I particularly like this, the sense of the reflected light bouncing in, which is good. So yeah, very nice, Alison. Thanks for sending that in. That's excellent. And also we can see nice diffused edges. Again, that helps with the depth. So next we've got Ellie. Ellie's sent this in. Now I think I've got a few of Ellie's. I think she said she did these mushrooms a while back. She can confirm whether that's true or not. But I'm glad she sent this in because this really nicely illustrates what we were talking about, which is a very large, so obviously relatively speaking the mushroom's quite small, but she's got down here at sort of eye level, and so we've now got these relatively big mushrooms against these small trees. So that really helps with the sense of depth. Now, what I would say about this, this also, as can often be the case with watercolours, it's probably also suffering a bit on a tonal level. So if we go black and white, okay. So when I take it to black and white, we can see that it's still, everything's a little bit perhaps too similar, okay. Now, I say that's a problem with watercolour. It's just because it's harder to get the dark darks. But again, what I'm trying to encourage you to do is think in this tonal way. Make the dark start. How can we create contrast? Okay, so areas here might be. So let's say, for example, these trees. We'll make this. Okay, these trees, we're going to make those dark. Okay, dark trees in the distance. So what I'm thinking here is dark trees, and then let's see if we can. So I'm just trying to select this landscape area. So if the trees are dark, that only leaves a few options for the surrounding, which is basically mid-tone. Okay, so let's. So I'm thinking this is going to be mid-value and the mushroom is going to be lighter. Okay, so let's. Let's go like that. Okay, so now, obviously it's a bit untidy, but you know, I could, that would all be sort of softened up. Now that mushroom's got something to work against. You see, it's actually playing against a dark, so it's become a light shape against dark. So, and then we darken all this foreground a bit more and let this one. So you're just trying to think simply in terms of, well, if this shape's light, I can play it against either a dark or a mid value, okay? And with the sky, this area, skies, it's best not to have the sky go from blue all the way down to blue. So maybe the sky could just be a bit grey. It could either be greyer or a bit yellower, or something like that. Okay, so it's not quite all blue all the way around. So something like that. So okay, and looking at it, I might even darken this foreground a bit further. But yeah, they're just sort of general principles. But as far as our main project, I think that's a really nice one. Yeah, no, it did. Yeah, it did fit the brief. It's excellent, Ellie. Thanks. And yeah, hopefully you could even put a few washers on over that and maybe sort of see if you could just really, you don't need to do much more to these mushrooms. It's just really using the background to make them sort of pop out a bit more, give them a bit more focus. Okay, and then Ellie's also sent in these oranges. Again, very nice study, and we do have our sense of depth here. We've got big to small, big to medium to small. Areas that I would just sort of, from a composition point of view, I would just be careful about this sort of thing. So let's have a look there. It's basically, it's where the edge of the orange so the edge of the orange comes around here, and then basically it just almost touches the edge of that, the edge of the composition. Same here, okay? It gets a bit close. So that's a tangent. Also a bit here gets a little bit close. So you either really want a gap, and a sort of, you know, a big enough gap that's a little bit small there, or you want it to overlap, okay? So an example might be, let's crop this. So if we brought that in a bit more, so that's more like half and half, and maybe even cropped this one in. Maybe. But now these have been cropped a lot more. It's clear that they have been cropped, okay? So yeah, just think about that with your composition. But yeah, no, the shadows are nice as well, and we've got some nice, I like this color scheme actually. I've been I'm still intending to do a video about the one that I painted, because I'm planning to paint it again, and I've been thinking a lot about the color scheme, and I think this orange and green I think works particularly well, so I like that. So thanks for that, Ellie. Very nice. And this is another one Ellie did. So let's also, we'll crop that just so we can see it a bit more. Okay, so very nice. So similar point here, just this area is a bit of a tangent. So it just it's just touching the edge. Gets a bit close here and a bit close there, okay? Other things, let's see. So this background is might be improved somewhat by a bit of a darkening. Okay, so if I darken that, in fact, also I would probably darken this as well. Okay, so darkening those two I think helps. You see? By darkening those, it sort of helps to keep our focus here. Okay, so and yeah, so also tonally here, maybe the table could also be a bit darker. So I think you, again, it's what you're really trying to do is set the things up so that the tonal values work in your favour. And what I mean by that really is that they're clear. Oh, don't want that. Nice and clear, dark against light, light against mid-tone, and so on. Okay, so but again, we've got big going to small, so that's what the brief was. So that's very good. So thanks for that, Ellie. That's great. And then next we've got Phil. So Phil sent in this nice watercolor. And he was asking me how it could be improved. So I was having a look and a bit of a think about it. I mean, it's a very nice arrangement. Well, I think that the handling of the objects is good. Something though I was thinking was where it could be improved. There's something about the line of sight. So a fork, as I was saying, foreground objects often serve to point our eye into our subject. So in fact, this fork does, it points us in to about here. Okay. But I think what I was thinking about the composition as a whole here is that basically everything is in the middle like this. So all our interest, and then this points towards this, but this is effectively a flat shape and this is a flat shape. Okay, I know it's got a bit of a diagonal. But really in a composition, you're looking to, you want your eye to basically go in and across and across. Okay, so you're trying to find ways to make the eye move across that middle area. So one thing I thought was, let's have a look. Now I don't know whether I'm going to be able to do this. This might be a bit too ambitious. Oh, there we go. So if I move that over there, I know that's not quite the same, but we're going there and then we've got a reason to go back. So if I was to, let's see. And then perhaps move that down there. Okay, so let's just crop that. So that's just as, I mean, obviously you could tidy all that up, but my just thoughts were, again, so if we did something like that, then maybe the eye has more of a chance to go over to here and then back over to here. You see? So just crossing the, but those are just suggestions. The other thing is the table itself is a bit flat, so obviously there is some light. I think the light source here, if we can see, there's a shadow being cast on this side. So what that would tend to mean is, like, let's say this table, the table table's going to be darker than the chair. Okay, and the reason is because if the light's coming from the side here, then it's going to hit that plane, which is a sort of like an upward facing plane, whereas the tabletop wouldn't be quite so influenced. Okay, so that would obviously go back into shade. So obviously this would all be a bit smoother in the way that it was done. And also, like I've been doing with these other ones, actually if you knock this back a little bit, that also might help, and that perhaps would make the apples just read a bit more. Okay, but that would be a much smoother gradient. So there we go. Just possibly, I guess what I'm saying is think a little bit about the way your eye is moving around the composition, and that might help. But I mean, the individual parts are rendered very well, but your eye naturally likes to follow a path. And so if you had maybe a tablecloth or more diagonals on this table, your eye could sort of zigzag and follow sort of paths that way. Okay. Now, let's have a look. So that's Phil's. Thanks for that, Phil. So on to Stuart's. This is Stuart's painting. Nice little study, good colours. I don't want to bring that in too much. So first point is, Stuart, yep, I really like that you've got the scale principle here, and you're also using some perspective to create a feeling of depth. So that's good. So we've got a big orange, medium, small. So that's nice. This area here, let's have a look, this area here. And because it's sort of playing, it feels like it would be the downward plane of the, like it looks like a conservatory or something like this. So with this area, I would be tempted to make that darker. Okay, so if you make that darker, then that now has a bit more to play against. Okay, so maybe not quite that dark, but I think you get the idea. That this would probably be a bit darker as well here. Okay. Because it's in shadow, it would be a downward plane. And then with the oranges themselves, obviously you've ended up, because you've the oranges have become a little bit small perhaps, and I think really what you're looking for is probably just a bit more clarity. They've just become a little bit, perhaps a bit too, something in the highlight here is a bit messy. So with the highlight, you want to try and keep things simple. So if we go for a smaller brush, okay, so if I'm going to lessen the highlight there. Okay, lessen the highlight. So that now gives the feeling that the light is hitting us there. Now, if I also, we've got some shadow down here. So again, it needs perhaps just a bit more, if it's a downward light, something a bit like that, I don't know. And then linking that with this shadow. I think that would make that one sort of read a bit clearer. And the same here. So if we go up with these two, so they almost merge into one another. So I think the simple thing is to, if we darken this background one like so, then at least that contour would now have something, that edge can read against the background one. And again, if I darken this one and link it to this shadow shape, so I'm just trying to make those read against each other like that, okay? And I think that now makes them just, we're just looking for the edges to read, and then it sort of pops in. But yeah, I think that's nice. So if we go, there it is. There's it before and after. Okay, so a bit more tonal variation, a bit more tonal contrast, and a little bit more clarity regarding the edges. So that's what I would do there. Okay. So Stuart also did this, which I think this is an excellent little drawing. Very nice study, and I like the. There's an air of concentration and focus on this one, which I really like. And I think it's also just a really good example of what we've been talking about. Is so by this big chair in the foreground with these smaller chairs, and then we've got this little house, you're creating this feeling of depth and distance. Some overlap here, and also overlaps. So this one actually has got, well, we've got volume because we've got a bit of shading, and we've got overlapping forms, we've got scale, and we've actually also got perspective. So really starting to introduce a feeling of depth here. So that's really good work. And I think the only thing maybe I would just suggest with it is maybe just using, like, if you're doing a pencil drawing, use darker. So you're doing it here, a nice dark outline with these thicker outlines in the foreground object, and maybe make these a little bit more delicate as they go away. And also with your shading, just be, once you've said, for example, this back fence is dark, so you squint and you see that it's dark against the sky. Well, make sure your shading sort of, you see that through and actually commit to that area being dark, okay? So, but yeah, very nice. And here we are, another little, this almost looks like an etching. That's what it made me think of. So here we're using scale without overlap. And I think here what I would say is, all I would consider, Stuart, is your setup, because you've got basically on the object here, you have got, let's see, go in a bit more. So you've got light coming into the side here and a shadow here, which would suggest the light coming from this way. Now, if that was the case, this would be reversed. You would actually have shadow on this side and light on this side. But the shadow that's being cast on the ground doesn't tie up with that, okay? So same here, light on this side, shadow on this side, but the shadow is almost coming from there. Now, if your objects are being, if these are all windows and you're doing it in a little conservatory area or something like that, you're going to perhaps have too much light coming in, but you really want you want to create a single light source. Okay, so so with these objects, okay, you just get, so if the light is coming from the side, that's dark and that's light. Okay, and it's a reversal because here is where you've got your dark. Okay, and then with this way, the light, your shadow is going to be more cast that way. Okay, so it'd be nice to see you perhaps have another go at this drawing, but setting it up with just a single, more stronger light source, and seeing what results you can get that way. Also, just think about this, you know, is this dark? Is this light? You know, it might be better for this to be dark and then the light on the sort of tabletop. So yeah, think about those tonal patterns. Okay, then we've got Teresa. So Teresa's sent in a couple today. So first one here, so we've got volume, like with the shadow there, and we've got our overlap. We've got this tree very strongly overlapping this thing, this sort of shed here. Scale, well, this one's not quite so clear with scale because this tree, I'm sure it did look like that, but it's almost smaller than the shed, okay, which is just a bit of an odd, I mean, it might just be a shrub or something like that, but that may not serve your sort of intentions as well as it might do. So normally, again, you want to think like perhaps a big tree in the foreground with a smaller shed in the distance. So that's just something you might just want to consider. So if we bring this down. The other thing I was just going to think about was with a composition like this, generally you want your foreground object to, it's really there to set the scale, to allow your eye to go through. So here we've got quite a lot of light on this tree. So what I would probably think to do is, if we, okay, if I've got this tree image, if I make that darker, okay, what I would say is if you make the tree darker like that, say, and obviously this is going to be a bit more, that's gonna, it's not going to pull the eye from this area. So this becomes, so like for example here, you could then go maybe even a bit lighter here. So this is definitely like you're pulling your attention into this area here, okay? So it's just a thing, just be careful with your foreground objects. Think more in terms of silhouette, okay? So like for example, say I add a little branch like that. Now that's a nice little silhouette idea, okay? Is it tells you a bit about, but you're just relying on a dark silhouette, okay? The other thing is cast shadow. So you should look for cast shadows in nature. Tend not to be as dark, say for example as the tree here. So in this case I would actually lighten this. Let's say, that's not worked particularly well. So what happens is the ambient light, the sky, all those sorts of things feed into it. Okay, so I'm just thinking more something a bit more like this sort of colour. And I'm actually making a bit of a mess of that, but let's say like that. So still getting darker as it comes under the base of the tree, but not relying so much on that dark, okay? And by lightening that shadow, it will give the whole thing will start to feel like there's a bit more air in, it's a bit more sort of atmosphere instead of relying on that black, okay? So this is another area against the light here where again silhouettes maybe breaking that slightly might be create a bit more interest that way, okay? But no, it's nice to see you painting outside, and I will give you some you mentioned about the pochade little painting box. I see Rupert Chitter's got one as well. So if people are going to start trying to paint outdoors, and perhaps I'll do a little session on that at some point as well. So Teresa's got another one. Here's her reference material. Again, good reference. You see, again, getting down nice and low, and that means that you're going to get the scale effect a bit more. So big, medium, small, and nice and diffuse. And then this is how she got on with it. With this little painting. And again, very nice little study there. And what she's done really nicely is she has done this nice hard edge here, and then this nice diffused one back here, and it really does create this amazing sense of depth. Hard edge and then soft edge, okay? And yeah, I think it works a treat. I think you know, we've got these nice dark, so it's a good tonal composition again on the light ground with the dark background. So I think if we look at this, so you look at Teresa's black and white, again, it's a very strong tonal composition, okay? So remember, this is what I've been trying to say to you, get nice strong tonal compositions, and that will just help you a lot. So using that white sheet, I think, has worked well. And also, it's introduced a diagonal, which also helps move the eye into the composition. So, yeah, so I really like that one, Teresa, that's great. And then here we are. Lastly, we've got Val's. So hi, Val. I hope Val's out there somewhere. Let's just okay. So she's done this nice little study of pears, and yeah, I don't know. I think you mentioned Val, you might be having a bit of trouble with the gesso and the paint sticking on. Okay, so it's definitely because it looks almost a bit shiny. So I would just recommend some Winsor and Newton gesso and get that off Amazon, and that might help you. Otherwise, it might be to do with the amount of medium you're using or the paints or all those sorts of things. But yeah, you can get problems like that. It's a very nice little painting. It's easier for me to see it. What's happened here is because it's been tilted in such a way, you've got some of the light bouncing off it. So just when you take your photograph of your painting, just try tilting it around so you get you don't get as much glare. But the first thing I can see is a nice clear sense of depth. We've got this large lemon here, and then this smaller pear and apple there. With overlap, so remember I was talking about overlap. So this pear, what might have been quite nice is, I know you were probably painting from, you know, you were standing up painting it. If you were photographing it though, if you got down a bit lower, I mean, maybe this could have even cut in like that. And we could have brought this background so if you brought the background down a bit, then you could get another overlap, you see. And what I'm doing there is by lowering the table now would come, say, round here, and that's going to be all be in shadow. Okay. So that would also give something for the pair to play against. So as opposed to just playing against the table, so something like that. So that's a way you could introduce another level of overlap, okay, which would help you with your sense of depth. And other things were, I thought maybe, you see, we've got this tablecloth here and we've got this like white wall here. I think if you, this white back here, remember white tends to pull the eye. Okay, so this is why I tend to hold back on using white, and you want to use it in the most interesting areas. Now this area here is more background, okay? So if we darken this down a bit, like so. Now by darkening that, what I'm trying to do is increase the contrast here. So let's use the brush. So if we get some of this white and we go in even a bit stronger here. Oh, sorry. That's nice. I like the way you pulled some of the colour of the apple into the tablecloth. So that's a nice touch there. But yeah, just lightening up here, lightening up back here. So now by darkening that down and lightening this, that's created this as a bit more of a focal point. This shape isn't ideal. You see we've just got a horizontal sort of strip. So either, and that's because it echoes the side of the canvas too much. So I would say there, let's have a look. I would quieten that square down. So again, just by darkening it. Okay, it's made a bit of a harsh line there, but you've still got the idea that now our interest is much more held around here. And if we took the whole thing now, I'm exaggerating it a bit there, but if it didn't have that hard line, so that would perhaps create a bit more of a dramatic feel, you see. So you can see obviously some themes reoccurring here. Is basically increase your contrast, clarify contours, so you've got dark against light or light against mid-tone, and just try and push, painting has to be fairly simple, so simplify the whole thing and just push these ideas as far as you can. Okay, so thanks a lot for that. For those of you that are in my Zoom meetings, let's have a look. All right, I'm upside down now. There we go. I don't know why it's done that. Let's see, there we go. For those of you in the Zoom meetings, I'll be having a Zoom tutorial in let's say, 10 past 11 on Zoom, okay? For the rest of you that are tuned in, thanks for watching. I'll be here on Monday morning with another tuition session looking at perspective. So perspective is quite a complex subject. So I'm going to try and talk about it really just in relation to still life actually forget that. I'll do a broad overview of perspective, but also include still life, because I can see some of you are quite keen to get out and do some landscape work at the moment. So I'll do a bit of a session on perspective that hopefully you'll find useful. Okay, so if you like the video, like down the bottom always helps, and subscribe, and I'll see you again on Monday.